I would invite you to stand in honor of the reading of the gospel. When Jesus came to the area of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say the human one is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others yet Jeremiah or one of the other prophets." He said, "And what about you? Who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied to Simon, "Happy are you, Simon, son of Jonah, because no human has shown this to you. Rather, my Father who is in heaven has shown you. I tell you that you are Peter, and I will build my church on this rock, and the gates of the underworld will not be able to stand against it." And then one phrase taken from the King James Version from chapter 12, verse 25. "A house divided against itself will not stand." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. And will you join with me in prayer? Gracious God, in these few moments we ask you to be with us in our thinking, in our speaking, in our hearing. That in and through it all we somehow gain a glimpse of what your Spirit is trying to teach us this day. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen. The great psychiatrist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung speculated that how a person responds in a word association exercise reveals something about how that person thinks and how they process information, which, according to Jung, ultimately reveals something about their character. One of my dearest friends was a Jungian psychologist and pastoral counselor. Occasionally, when he and I would meet for lunch, he would subtly, very subtly, work in a word association exercise without me having a clue what he was doing. I remember the first time he did it. He said, "What are the words that come immediately to your mind if I say the word Christian?" Well, I sat across the table from him like a bump on a log. I was, of course, analyzing. What's he up to? If I say this, he's going to think that about me. Or if I say this particular word, he's going to wonder what kind of Christian I am. So I just sat there and I said nothing. Well, Bob was smart enough to know what I was thinking. He said, "Stop overthinking. Be spontaneous. Just give me the word that pops into your mind." Well, if we were in a different space where we could interact with one another, I would ask you to take out a blank piece of paper along with a pencil or a pen and write down all the words that come to your mind in 60 seconds if I said the word church to you. Some of us might say it's a building. Others might associate church with Christian or Protestant or Catholic or Orthodox. Some might say Methodist, Presbyterian, Reformed, or Baptist. Somebody might identify a particular congregation, while others might name particular characteristics that you enjoy within the church, such as, we're Methodists, right? You'd say potlucks, of course. Or classes, or coffee and cookies, or baptisms, or funerals, or membership, or fellowship, or music, and choir, and hymn singing, or worship, faith, sacraments, growing and learning. Probably somebody would say people. If you happen to be a person that had a negative experience in church, your list might be very different. Your words might include a list of judgmental, hypocritical, self-righteous. I would imagine there would be a different set of words used by people who are deeply committed and invested in the church than the words that would be chosen by folks who are sporadically involved. If we were to select a group of people who had never been involved in any church and ask them to simply read the newspaper and listen to the news reports, and then after 90 days ask them to identify the images that they have gleaned about the church, no doubt their perceptions would be very different than the perceptions of people who are actually involved in the church. What we might be able to agree on is this. Our definition of church is largely dependent on our experiences with the church and its people. This past week, one of the tragedies that occurred not far from here was an accident that happened in northwest Charlotte when an automobile collided with a horse-drawn buggy carrying an Amish family traveling home from school activities. 3 children were killed, and a 4th child was critically injured. It was of interest to me because my first solo pastorate was in Charlotte. During the 3 years I spent there, I became aware of the Amish community that was growing significantly north of town toward Nashville and Vermontville. The Amish folks were lovely people. They were quiet, unassuming, hard-working, devout. I would occasionally meet and greet them in the stores or at the farmer's market or in the storefronts that they had established to sell their produce, their meat, their poultry, baked goods. Oh, their baked goods. And furniture. I enjoyed talking with the people and learning about their faith convictions and their values and the lifestyle they had either inherited or chosen. Being Amish would not be for me. But I admire what they believe and their devotion to God and how they work to be congruent in aligning their faith and their values and their practices. Well, if you have paid attention to the articles and the news reports about how that Amish community is dealing with their grief, 12 to 1,500 people put everything on hold to surround that devastated family with love and care, presence, and support. During this season of grief, they eat together. They get together and pray. They take care of each other out of love in ways that are almost New Testament-like. The non-Amish neighbors have felt the pain and the anguish of that Amish community And they felt a need to respond with some expression of care as well. A GoFundMe page was set up by the Vermontville Fire Department to assist that grieving family, as well as the entire community, as a way to simply help in a tangible way. Unfathomable grief is bringing people together. Now, they don't get together to debate or disagree over doctrine. They don't examine one another's lifestyle choices or the clothing that's worn or what mode of transportation is acceptable or not acceptable. It's simply people responding to other people out of care and concern. And in this day and age, we need all the positive images we can muster about faith communities, because what we hear and read about in the media is a constant focus on all the problems, particularly the problems in the church. But I want to tell you, friends, there is far, far more good that happens in our communities of faith than the negative stories that seem to get the attention of the press. Oh, I know that the Christian community at every level has challenges. But in spite of our challenges, there is so much good that's happening that we seldom see or read about or hear about. I am a lifelong participant in the church. I have worked professionally in the church since 1971. I have served in pastoral ministry since 1979. I have seen the good and the not so good, the positives and the negatives, the lovely and the ugly. I have met the nicest people, just as I have met some that make the devil seem good. I have observed and tried to manage disagreements and conflicts that are heartbreaking. And through it all, I am still delighted to be a Christian, and I am still delighted to be part of the church. I love God's church. For my entire professional ministry, I have regularly entered into the arenas of debate and disagreement and conflict and confrontation, not because I want to be remembered or known as a critic, but rather as a critical lover. And there's a big difference between the two. I want to be known as someone who asks the tough questions, stands against injustice, practices a vibrant faith, and leads the community of faith with integrity, passion, and compassion. I want things to be better than when I came in to ministry. Yes, we have enormous conflict within the Christian church, and yes, we even have enormous conflict within the United Methodist Church. In our era, it seems that every denomination and many congregations all across the country are experiencing deep conflicts and often leading to schism. But therein, I believe, lies our greatest challenge. The church is of God, but the church is also people. You and I are the church. We are the church. Even though the church was created by divine action, God entrusted the church to humanity in much the same way that God created the heavens and the earth and entrusted the care of the earth to people. As people of faith, we are in partnership with the divine. So through prayer and study and engaging in open and honest dialogue with one another, we can discern the mind of Christ as we seek God's guidance in what we believe, in how we value and treat one another, and what we do in seeking justice and equality for all God's people. So there is no question in my mind, friends, that the church will survive any conflict that comes from either within or from outside influences that attempt to silence the voice of the faithful. We have a voice, you know. We have a voice to proclaim mercy and grace and goodness, and then model those characteristics for our world. It is the way in which the world sees Jesus. One of the most powerful speeches of all time was delivered in June of 1858 by a newly named candidate for U.S. Senate from the state of Illinois named Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln was a deeply spiritual person who read voraciously, including his regular reading of the Bible. This is an ever so brief excerpt from that speech. If we could first know where we are, we could better then judge what to do and how to do it. We are now in the 5th year since a policy was initiated of putting an end to slavery. Under that policy, slavery has not ceased, but has constantly been augmented. In my opinion, Lincoln said, it will not cease until a crisis has been reached and passed, because a house divided against itself cannot stand. Mr. Lincoln was, of course, quoting the teachings of Jesus. We too, all of us do, know that a house divided against itself has a difficult time surviving. And yet, I believe that the most insightful line in Mr. Lincoln's speech was this: if we know where we are, we could then better judge how to do and what to do. Do we know where we are? A few days ago in this sanctuary, I officiated at the memorial service for a colleague and friend, Ken McCall. A couple of years ago, again here in this sanctuary, I officiated at the memorial service of Chuck Fry. Both of them highly regarded as leaders, spiritual leaders, great pastors, great pastoral examples. And both of these giants of the faith said to me more than once, First Church in Grand Rapids is the best church this side of heaven. Now, I don't know if that's true or not. But of all the churches that I have attended and served and supervised when I was superintendent, First Church is the best church I have ever served. You see, usually within any congregation, there are pockets of discontent where people get together in their discontentment to create conflict within a congregation. In over 6 years of being here, I have watched and I have listened carefully. And the lack of congregational conflict is both highly unusual, but it is applaudable. Now, I don't mean that there are no disagreements or differences of opinion. There have been some folks who have exited this community of faith to align with other congregations. And that makes any pastor sad. And it does me. But the way this congregation manages its life and its ministry is a model of health that is good. It's very good. Lay leaders are prayerful and careful and thoughtful in decision-making. There's a deep commitment of the people to grow in faith and be engaged in ministry. There is faithfulness in giving. There is a genuine welcome to the guest. There appears to be a graciousness in the way folks listen and interact with one another. There is a long, long history of significance, of weathering tough times over the years and staying significant. There is vision, there is mission, there is outreach. This is the kind of church that will survive the turbulence that we are experiencing within our society, as well as within the Christian community. God's church will survive. And as the people of God, we are called to be a beacon of light, using our influence to positively affect our world. Friends, we have a job to do. Let's do it, and do it well, shall we? Let's be the church built upon the sure foundation of God's love and mercy, peace and hope. May it ever be so. Amen. Thank you for being with us in this time of worship. We trust that God has moved in you through something that has been said or the hymns that have been sung. And thank you, Pete, for taking us into that journey with you. Thank you for writing that song and sharing it with us. I love Christ Church, just as I love this church. God has called us all together to be part of this body, this congregation, to do work that is needed in our community. We are doing that in remarkable ways, but there is yet more work to be done. May God give us the vision. May God give us the strength and empower us by God's Spirit to do our work in the name of Christ. May God bless us all as we journey forward. Amen.